So well, obviously we spent 2 hours talking about Michael's journey, him coming out as gay to you guys, and kind of ways that might have stretched and challenged you. I don't want to necessarily retell that story. I'll just refer listeners who didn't hear those first 2 hours to that. But just, it's safe. Your full-blown faith crisis didn't start until 2019. And it wasn't until 2013, 14, 15.
15.
Well, Michael came out to you in 2000.
Michael came out to us in 2012, but we didn't believe him. We didn't think that was a thing, and it certainly didn't fit into the Mormon paradigm. And so he's going through a phase, or he hasn't even hit puberty. So how could he possibly know this? That therefore it's not a thing. And I didn't try to educate myself or look beyond Mormonism for anything, because I guess I was in denial. Like, he's not really gay, so I don't need to know anything about being gay. Like, I never have. I've never wanted to, and so why would I now? Because he's not really gay. So
okay.
But he came out in 2015 publicly, and at home, like, we came to terms with it at some point where we realized he is gay, and that's not going to change, and it's not a phase. Like, this is part of Michael. This is part of who he is. And
so prior to him really coming out in 2015, prior to the November policy, but that's the same year I was excommunicated, and I can just say that kind of those 10 years from 2005 to 2015 was a really active year for kind of progressive and post-Mormonism. You can think about like blogs and then podcasts and the CES letter and the church essays and just all the, the excommunications. Like, you would think, and this is like one of the most stunning parts about Mormon stories and my journey, is I'm thinking, whoa, this is really catching on. This stuff's covered in not just the Salt Lake Tribune and the Deseret News, but these stories are covered, polygamy stories, or Jeremy Runnels or Hans Matson or whatever it is, multiple stories in the New York Times, Washington Post, even, London newspapers, the world, and Mitt Romney, like, the world is talking about all these controversial Mormon things, all these people getting excommunicated, the essays, CES letter, Mormon stories. And how was that experienced by you and your husband, kind of in the Provo bubble, as you call it?
It was not experienced.
Explain that. Will you explain that to me?
I didn't know any of that was going on. That was not on my radar at all. Like,
how is that possible? New York Times, Salt Lake Tribune, Deseret News, it's in all the papers.
Because that's anti-Mormon stuff.
Right.
And I'm really good at shutting things out, like, nope, not going there. And LGBT issues too. Nope, not going there. And I just would not. I remember hearing about the September 6th, and I didn't really know what that was. I knew that a bunch of people had been excommunicated. I think they had been at BYU. And my immediate assumption, without knowing anything about it or ever finding anything out about it, was they did something wrong. They went against the church. They got excommunicated. They should have been excommunicated. The end. Move about, go on with my happy little life. I'd heard the name John Dehlin, and I just, at some point, I think I knew that, and I didn't know what a podcast even was back then, but I remember hearing your name, but I remember hearing it in negative tones, like from where, I don't remember where I heard it, but it was like John Dehlin, excommunication. And that's as far as I took it. I was like, "Oh,
you don't need
John
anything
Dehlin.
else.
Whoa,
stay way bad."
Yeah, like if somebody said the name John Dehlin, I was like, "Nope." I didn't. And that all your stuff not on my radar. I knew that you were a bad guy.
Yeah,
that's all I knew. Like, you had been excommunicated, therefore you're a bad guy, and I don't want to know anything about it.
What about ordained women and Kate Kelly and being a feminist and all that stuff?
Okay. I'm a feminist, I guess. Like, in a good sense. I'm not militant.
No, at the time.
At the time, I remember hearing about Kate Kelly because she's related to someone in my ward. And that was bigger news, I for some reason that somehow got on my radar, but just barely, like a little blip. But I'm like, who wants to be, what woman in the LDS Church wants to have the priesthood? Like, that's ridiculous. Like, oh my gosh, like the last thing on the planet I would want is to be the bishop. Like, I can't even imagine anything worse. So like, why would you want the priesthood? Like, why would they want that? So sacrilegious, blasphemous, not the way things are done, not the way it's ever been. Women don't hold the priesthood. So Kate Kelly went onto the shelf of bad people.
Right.
And when she was excommunicated, I felt sorry for her, and I saw some of her media things, like news conference, whatever, and listened to her speak, and I'm like, she's super radical. Like, wow. Like, how could anybody follow her? And then I knew that she had some online something, and I went to look at it, and there were pictures of other women who supported her, and I'm like, you allowed your name and your picture to be put on a website with Kate Kelly? Like, you're standing behind that? Like, who are you? Like, these women must be apostates. Like, I can't even imagine. I remember there was something out on social media at one point that said, women unite or something, everybody wear pants to church on Sunday. And I was like anybody's going to do that. Nobody's going to wear pants. You don't wear pants. Like, wow. Anyway, so kind of not on my radar. It was just anything like that was just pushed away quite successfully. So,
and then, like the Book of Mormon historicity, the DNA in the Book of Mormon, like Book of Abraham and the translation controversies, Joseph Smith's polygamy, polyandry.
I'd never heard of any of that.
Through past 2015.
Yeah, no.
That's so unbelievable.
Listen.
With farms, with Maxwell Institute, like...
Never even heard of FAIR, never heard of farms, never heard of the Maxwell Institute. No, I'd heard of the Maxwell Institute because I had been past the building where it was housed. But when it said farms outside, I'm like, they still do farms here? Like, I thought we were past the agriculture side. I honestly had no idea. It was not on my... Because I was so deeply enveloped in the church and in my devotion and my faith and wanting to be loyal and faithful. Those things just weren't on my radar. And if they ever came across my radar, they quickly went off again. It just wasn't.
The church has such a powerful hold on information and on people's thoughts.
Well, and it's like you say, they don't let you leave with your dignity. I knew the name John Dehlin because you'd been kicked out with no dignity, like you were now...
And smeared and marginalized.
Yeah, exactly. And to listen to you was tantamount to also being an apostate. So like anything that you said, I would never... Even in 2019, beginning of 2019, I had a friend who's like, you need to listen to this podcast by John Dehlin. And as soon as the word John Dehlin came out of her mouth, I was like, nope, I just won't. So the historicity of the Book of Mormon, of course it's real. I taught my primary children in front of the whole primary during sharing time about the Book of Mormon and how it was written for our day. Like, it's so clear to me. Like, if you read it as a book, like you would read Harry Potter, you pick it up, you read it all the way through, right? Like, not studying, but like just read it all the way through. It's obvious that this was written for our day, for me, for you right now, because history repeats itself and all the things that happened to them could happen to us if we follow that path and blah, blah, blah. It was real. Nephi was a real person, like, he was like with flesh and blood. He was a real person. He lived in this world. He lived on this continent. And there were times when we traveled or whatever, or even if we were just up in the mountains, and there was part of me that thought, I wonder if Nephi walked here. Like, did he see what I'm seeing? Like, the first person I wanted to see when I got to heaven was Joseph Smith and Nephi. Truly. And President Kimball. I was scared of President Kimball as a teenager. He was my teenage prophet, but I also really admired him. Anyway, so yeah, the Book of Mormon is 100% factual. It happened.
Right.
It all happened. The fact that Christ came here and gave the same sermon he gave in Jerusalem. Well, obviously he would have, because it's Christ and he's teaching the most important truths, and they're going to be almost word for word, because what he taught them was so important that we would need to be taught it too, the people in America. And so of course he taught them, what he taught in Matthew, he taught in 3rd Nephi. And I remember reading the scriptures as a teenager and got to 3rd Nephi where Christ came down and the whole story surrounding that and how the children were enveloped by flames and angels came down and ministered to them. And I pictured that, and in my mind that was so real and true that it was as if I were there. And I remember reading that and just crying, thinking this book is true. Like it was such a beautiful thought that Christ would come and angels would surround those sweet innocent children with flames, and that it was so real. It was so real and true.
I mean, I'm watching you tear up as you tell the story of your Orthodox Mormon beliefs. You must have really believed it and loved it.
I did.
For how long?
My whole life.
How many years?
50.
I mean, 49.
49. 49, yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we take off the part where I was a kid and didn't know, so maybe my whole adult life. So from 15, 16, 17 on, I was a true, I was all in.
Yeah.
I'm a Mormon. True blue, tight, dyed in the wool, whatever. I'm a true blue Mormon. And I would stand up for my rights. And I remember walking out of movies because they were PG-13. Or actually, I didn't go to PG-13 movies, but even in a PG movie, if there was a scene that seemed a little inappropriate, I would get up and walk out. Like even as a teenager and even as an adult. Like we lived in West Jordan, and I went to the movies with some friends in my neighborhood, and there was a part where they were talking about something that, I don't know, of a sexual nature. It was inappropriate, but it wasn't like explicit or anything. But I'm like, guys, I gotta go. And I got up and walked out of the movie and went home and then felt sad and hoped that they didn't think I was judging them, because I certainly wasn't. But I'm like, I hope that they don't think that I think I'm better than them or whatever for walking out. But I just couldn't be there because the Spirit's not there. So.
We're having great comments from listeners. So Wendy says, this sounds so familiar.
I'm sorry.
Brian says, what a great interview. Hi, Kristen. Kristen writes, I think the reason so many members don't have any idea about outside information is because the only thing that matters is what the prophet is saying now.
Exactly.
If the prophet isn't saying it now, it's not important.
Exactly.
Including overriding what past prophets have said. That doesn't matter.
No, because no, it's what's happening now. This is a living and true church with continued revelation, and what they say is gospel truth. When the ensign comes out, I studied it as if it were my scriptures. Yeah, because it is scripture.
It is scripture.
For the next 6 months, it's scripture.
Yeah, I used to make the joke: how do you know if the prophet is speaking doctrine? His mouth is moving.
Oh, if it's said over the pulpit, there were times when we would have a discussion and somebody would say something that seemed like it could be a little off or what, and Steve would say, where's that reference? Like he wanted the reference. If it was said in general conference over the pulpit, that is revelation, that is gospel truth. That came from God, because the prophet is God's mouthpiece. He speaks for God. The end,
Yeah.
So, and I never knew on basic doctrinal, like big doctrinal things, that past prophets has said anything different than prophets nowadays. I just knew these are our prophets now, and we follow them, and they're always going to lead us in the right direction. And it even says in one of the student manuals, I think it's church history, might be Book of Mormon, quoting some general authority saying that God will never lead you astray. He will not allow the leaders of this church to lead you astray. If that were to happen, they would be taken out of their place, which to me meant they would die of a heart attack or something. Like they would just be taken up. They'd get cancer. I don't know. But we would never be allowed to be led astray. This is God's church. It just would not. He would not allow it to happen. Right. And President Nelson said, you don't need to worry about who to trust. You trust us. And I was like, didn't even need to say it. Of course. Of course. So
we spent a lot of time talking to former Mormon bishops about what it's like to be a bishop. What's it like to be a Mormon Relief Society president or Stake Young Women's president?
Stressful.
And then what's it like to do that in Provo?
It's super stressful. Oh gosh. First, I have to say that I was primary president, and I remember looking in the mirror and feeling like I fit that description. Like, I looked in the mirror in the morning and I'm like, I'm the primary president. Like, yeah, totally.
I'm happy, I'm perky, I'm positive.
Yeah, and I love the kids so much, and it fit me like a glove. The bishop called me into his office. I had been a counselor in the primary, and then the president moved away. They put me in as the president, and I was in for about a year, and the bishop called me into his office, and I thought it's primary related or whatever, and he said, we would like to extend another calling, and I was like, but I thought I was safe for at least another year and a half, from changing whatever. Anyway, but Steve was there with me, and he said, we want to call you to be the Relief Society president. And I immediately did the ugly cry. I mean, there was no take a breath. I was like, how could this happen? Like, do you, no, I'm not Relief Society material, because I've seen the Relief Society presidents in this ward, the ones before me, and I am not them. I am not Relief Society president material. I'm really good at supporting. I'll be a counselor. I'm really good at doing what I'm told too. I'm very obedient. Anything that needs to be done, I will do it. It doesn't matter how hard it is. I will make it happen. But to be the one in charge, to be the Relief Society president, no. Because I had always idolized and looked up to whoever was in charge, the Relief Society president, the bishop. And I truly thought that they were as close to perfect as a person can get without being like the prophet, and that you'd somehow arrived. When you're the Relief Society president, it means you've checked all the boxes and you have arrived. Mm-hmm. And God trusts you so much that He's made you and I'm like, that is not me. I'm just me.
Right.
And I cried and cried and cried. And of course you don't turn a calling down. And I didn't even want, of course I didn't want to be the Relief Society president, but I wasn't going to turn that calling down. And I'm like, of course I'll do it, but you realize it's just me. So he's like, we have so much faith in you. Anyway, so I became the Relief Society president, looked in the mirror and said, I'm the Relief Society president, and said, ooh, I'm not. I don't fit the mold. I'm not perfect. You know what I mean? There's still so many things I'm working on, and I'm not good enough,
Yeah.
So then I go back.
That's a theme. That's a theme in your life, by the way.
It seems to be, huh? It's kind of sad.
Their authority after your talk, if you only knew.
Yeah.
Right. Each time.
I still feel that way. I have people make comments to me, that are very kind. And I go, thanks.
Yeah.
But
my guess is you're not the only Mormon woman to feel that way.
Probably not the only woman or person.
I'm just saying there's a striving in this culture that implies never enough.
I just have to prove. Yeah. It's never going to be enough. There's nothing you can do to be good enough. You will never get there. Be perfect, even as my Father in heaven. And then it was such a relief to me at one point. Somebody in a lesson said, that doesn't mean you have to be perfect in this life. It means that's what we're striving for. And when we get to heaven, then we'll reach perfection. And I was like, okay. So I'm like, but I'm still that doesn't change my behavior. I'm still going to try to be perfect. It just means that if I don't make it in this life, at least I won't go straight to hell. And many, many thoughts throughout my life that I might not make it to the celestial kingdom. If I die today, it's a constant theme in my head. If I die today, will I go to heaven? If I die today, will I go to the celestial kingdom? And oftentimes the answer was no. No. And then, okay, I've got a lot more work to do, and I would just jump on it and go. But being the Relief Society president didn't feel like it fit, but I loved it. I didn't love the attention. I hated sitting at the front of the room because it felt pretentious. Look at me, I'm at the front of the room. But at the end, our bishop had asked us to do that. And I understand, the reason he said we should do it is because the women need to know who you are so that if they have needs, they know who to go to. And I was like, all right, I could get behind that. So I sat at the front of the room. I loved serving. I loved the lessons. I loved the sisterhood that I felt with the people in my ward, the closeness that I felt. I belonged, I belonged there. It was really nice to, there were needs in our ward at that time that were pretty heavy duty. And I was so not happy, because the needs came from just health issues and stuff that were really hard for those people to be living with. But if I could be there and relieve that even a little bit, whatever that meant, I was so happy to do that. And I didn't go back to church and say, I did this, and I did, you know what I mean? It was just like, I got up in the morning, I took my shower quickly, I went to this person's house, spent 4 hours with them every single day. Every single day.
So without identifying like people getting sick, people having babies, like what are the types of issues a Relief Society president might help out with?
Babies being born, funerals were kind of a big thing. Everybody rallied. It's really interesting and a beautiful thing. Someone dies either expectedly or unexpectedly, and within 3 days we've got this giant event planned and executed and cleaned up after, and you know what I mean? Like the way people rally behind families and come together and are so willing and eager to help in whatever way that means, whether it means bringing funeral potatoes or going early to set up chairs, whatever it meant, the people showed up. Always, So babies being born, people, funerals and stuff, unexpected tragic death, severe health issues, life-threatening. And then there's the needs of like getting financial help from the bishop and my part in doing that, and helping people in that way. And I don't know, mowing lawns for people, babysitting kids while they went to the temple, or they, went to the grocery store, taking care of kids while the mom has super bad morning sickness, babysitting the twins so that the mom can be home with the newborn. Just, all the things that happen in life in a ward, being there for it. And truly I felt like there were lots and lots of minor miracles and several gigantic miracles. I don't know if there's another word for that that's not Mormon that would explain, but times when we had families who had needs at Christmas time, and so we were giving out food baskets and clothing and hams and stuff like that to different people in the ward, and being short one ham, and then having someone call up and say, hey, we have an extra ham in our freezer, and it was exactly what we needed, exactly when we needed it. And I remember delivering these hams in the middle of the night, so it's dark outside, and I've got 10-pound hams, and I'm delivering them and getting that one last ham, and I remember standing in the middle of the road with that ham and just like looking around and going, nobody knows this is happening, like nobody knows this miracle, but I know. And being really grateful that I got to be there.
To be there what?
To just be part of it.
Did you love it? Was it a pain? What was it? How would you describe that service?
I had a thought one day. I was leaving this lady's house after helping her with some stuff, and I was going back to my car, and I was exhausted, like physically, mentally exhausted. And I just remember walking to my car, but feeling exhilarated at the same time, like I need a nap. But I'm so happy and fulfilled. I feel very fulfilled. And I remember as I'm walking across the street thinking to myself, these thoughts, like this was the thought in my head. Even if this church weren't true, I would belong. Like I would be here because of this. Because I feel like I have the capacity to love and serve, and this is my outlet. It's my way to do that. It's how I love and serve And not because I wanted celestial glory or because I was trying to make my way to heaven or to prove myself to the stake president. It was because I wanted to. It made me feel good. It made me happy. And the love that I had for the people in my ward was very strong. So yeah.
Beautiful comments are coming in from listeners. Cher writes, Donna Showalter is a great person. Cher McCoy.
That's very kind.
Trent says, as she is demonstrating, humans are the only real angels and source of miracles. That's his opinion, but
it's very kind.
Clearly, you guys were miracles to many people, as you said. Tamara writes, I love serving as well. Juliet, hey Juliet, she connects with the idea that no one's ever good enough in church. Mm-hmm. There's always this drive to do better. And I think that's a double-edged sword because it makes you want to serve and excel motivation. And it motivates you. Yeah. And for some, there might be a really high cost. But, I was just having this thought as again, the Mormon Stories, the podcast has been going on for 14 years, and Jeremy Runnels, the CES letter has been really successful, and, Bill Reel and John Larson. There's a lot of male-run podcasts that have, made a big difference. And of course, Lindsay Hansen Park did Your Polygamy, and she runs Sunstone. But I've been really struck. What's that?
Natasha Parker.
Natasha Alford Parker, and she's amazing, and Gina Colvin. But I've been really stunned by when I've watched the Mama Dragons and when I've watched Stephanie Larson with Encircle and when I've watched Waka, Women of a Certain Age, the level of sophistication and impact that these female-led organizations, and I think I'd count Sunstone in that as well, like the ability that Mormon women have to organize and get stuff done, bring people together, navigate conflict, serve, is it's something profound at a level that for me eclipses what I've seen men be able to do in the same arena.
And without being paid, just as
or getting
from a desire
glory
to do
or
good.
Fame or attention or money.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's profound.
Release Society is a really good training ground for that, I think. For me, it was anyway. Being part of the Release Society, not the president, but just being in Release Society, watching how women rally and really rise to whatever occasion it is and get stuff done. Like we got stuff done.
Yeah. And I think about, this is not to be self-effacing or blow sunshine, but in a million years, I couldn't have done what Stephanie Sorensen did with the Circle,
okay, no.
Stephanie Larson, or what Kim Turner's done with Waka, or with what Lindsay's done with Sunstone. There is something profound about what Mormon women can do that we have no idea.
Yeah, yeah. I look at what Stephanie's done and it blows me away and it makes me I need a nap. I'm exhausted just thinking about what she's done, this monumental thing where it's not just had this idea of this would be a good thing, but actually went and did that thing. And it's been so huge and life-changing and life-saving and perspective changing. So many people in all these organizations changed and helped and bettered because a woman stood up and said, I'm going to change this thing.
But bringing this back to you and other women who serve in such callings, men are in leadership. It's the patriarchy in the Mormon Church. It's the elders quorum presidents and the high priest group leaders and the bishops and the stake high councilmen and the stake president, the stake presidency and the general authorities. They sort of get all this attention. They get all this power, right? But when it comes down to what lived experiences really drive devotion and commitment to the church, it's got to be that a huge percentage of that is the experiences that people have connected to female service in the church. It's the casseroles that get delivered. It's the funerals that get taken care of. Like you said it yourself, you were like at some point, even if the church weren't true, I'm in this because it's so wonderful. How many millions of Mormons are like, the church may not be true, but these women delivered these casseroles. These women visited me when I was sick. These women watched my kids. These women took care of me or my wife when we had cancer. These women planned the funeral. These women have provided so much service. Even if the church weren't true, I'm in it.
It's a great organization. Like even if it weren't faith-based, if it was just an organization where we served and helped each other, it's a great thing.
Yeah, it's a great organization, but also in some ways it's the backbone of the church. The priesthood and male authority and patriarchy is kind of held up as the backbone of the church. All that leadership and priesthood leaders. But that's almost like a facade for maybe what the real heart and soul of Mormonism is, which is the community, which is largely driven by women. Without the fame, without the power, without the hard power, without the real recognition behind the scenes. In some ways, that's the real Mormonism, I think. Or at least
I think so.
The heart of Mormonism.
The heart, yeah.
Am I overstating it?
No, I think behind every good man is a great woman. So I think for me personally, you have to know too, I was raised by a Texan, so from Texas, and it's a whole different culture mindset down there, especially back in the day, right? So children were meant to be seen, not heard. It is, at least in my family, 100% obedience to whatever I tell you to do right this minute. Like you will, no questions asked. And, if my dad said jump, I'd say how high, because the consequences for not were dire. And so I learned from a very young age, just as part of the culture of growing up where I grew up and how, and, obedience and keep, and be quiet and do what I tell you to do. So I fit in at church, be quiet. Okay. And I always felt like I could speak my mind, whether or not they took my advice, whatever, but I always felt like I could speak my mind, but I was also very obedient. I'm just an obedient person. Tell me to do it and I'll do it,
Right.
With everything I've got. So.
How does the church do that? How does the church get women to obey and serve without giving them the authority and the attention and the money, that men get? How do they do that?
I have no idea. I think I think for most women, there's a desire to do good. And there's all the talks about you'll never quite be good enough, but keep on trying. And so we just keep trucking along. Like I got to prove myself, and I think for a lot of people too, like there've been periods in my life where that's how I felt. And there've been periods where I'm like, this is what I'm living for. Like I love it. I love it. I don't care if they don't want my opinion in ward council. I'm happy to sit quietly. Like I'm not a Kate Kelly, although I admire her. I've just always been like, I'll lead if you want me to, but I'll also follow if you want me to. I'm very malleable. So.
And some are going to say that's like servitude, or that's like internalized sexism, or that's like abusive, or some are going to say that's bad, that women are subjugated and made to be subservient in the church and don't have equality and don't have power. That's one way to look at it. There's probably truth in that you guys were kind of victims or taken advantage of.
I don't feel
You're
that.
not like it, because there's another point of view, which is like, hey, we don't have to deal with all that crap.
Oh, yeah.
And we get to just
I don't
do
want
the
to be
good
the elders
stuff.
quorum president. I don't want to be the bishop. Like, why would I? That's ridiculous. Like, who would want that? Like, so I'm happy to just go about my business, do my little thing,
You didn't want that.
No.
Because why?
Because I had seen the long hours and the worry and that I honestly, being the Relief Society president, I knew things about things and people in the ward that I did not want to know about. Like it was a burden, and it made me worry, and it increased my love for sure. But to be the bishop and have to be the one who to actually fix it, like I don't want that. It's too much, too much pressure.
And when ordained women was sort of more of a thing, and people were paying attention to it, at some point, I think the Trib or the Deseret News did a survey of Mormon women. It turned out that women wanted the priesthood even less commonly than men wanted it for the women. In other words, active, devoted Mormon men were more concerned about women having the Mormon priesthood than women were. And all of us just made the assumption, well, they're just, and this is going to sound rude, and I don't mean to totally overgeneralize, but I think a lot of us just said, well, they don't know better. It's just internalized sexism. They're just so downtrodden and abused that that they don't even know what they want or what's good for them. It sounds like maybe that's an inadequate reading, maybe even an insulting reading, that in reality, Mormon women maybe just really enjoy what their role is, and realize that the role that the men have isn't something they're very interested in because it's painful or tedious or uninteresting relative to what their role is, which is compassionate service, almost Christ-like service. Is that possible?
Yeah, I think for me, I listened. My ears perked up when the prophet would speak and say, "You're doing better than you think you're doing. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great." And women, we love the women in our church. They're so great, and they're such nurturers. And then there were the lessons in probably Sunday school that said, men have the priesthood because they can't have babies, and so that was God's way of like compensating. So I always felt like my calling as a mother was like super divine and made me really, really special. And the guys got like the booby prize, they get the priesthood because they can't have babies. And I believed that. And so I feel like a lot of women, I don't want to overgeneralize either, but a lot of women that I've known are happy to just like this is going to sound bad. We know our place. Like I know that Relief Society and Primary and Young Women's is my half of the building, and that's your half of the building, and it's totally fine. I know what I'm doing is good, and good things are coming from it, and I always felt respected and admired and loved by my priesthood leaders, brethren, whatever, and so for me this has never been an issue.
So there's a part of me wondering, like, because I know other women that are just like furious about this and really agitated and really on fire and really resentful. And like they get to 40 or 50 or 60 and they're like, I can't believe what I let men do and how I gave my power away. So as I talk to you, I'm trying to decide where on the continuum you are of just like not having had some super feminist awakening yet, and that's in the future, to just a different personality type. Maybe. And that just people value different things, and this is just where you come down in terms of personality and values relative to other people.
And I'm not invalidating anyone else's, like wherever someone falls on that spectrum, that's valid, and that's their experience, and that's how they feel, and that should be honored and respected. Just saying, for me, this is how I feel about things.
Okay.
So
yeah, today.
But, yeah. Maybe tomorrow will change. And my daughter is ultra feminist, and I'm so proud of her. She's so strong, and she has found her voice. That's the thing. I also feel like I didn't realize that I didn't have a voice until Michael came out, a little while after Michael came out. But and then finding my voice and realizing that what I have to say matters and that I need to speak my truth. That has been really, really valuable for me. But I didn't come to that until Michael came out, and I was put in a position where I had to speak. I could not have stayed silent. So for those who have found their voice, I applaud that. My daughter has a strong, beautiful, knowledgeable, wise voice.
Right.
And it's beautiful.
But from the tears you were shedding, it's clear that you deeply loved the opportunity to serve in primary and young women's and Relief Society.
Yes.
Was there ever a concern, and maybe we've already addressed this, but like men control the budget, men have to approve who you want as a counselor, men are always visible, men get to make the final decisions, like either on the ward or stake level. Was there ever any of that in your mind?
There were times when, we know that callings are given by inspiration, and it's a calling from God. And when I've been given callings, that's the way it's been framed. This is a calling from Heavenly Father to you. It's been, we've prayed or whatever, and you are the name, you're the person for this calling. And I believed that. And so there were times as a leader where I would submit a name, and they would come back and say no. And I would say, so I would question myself, like if I got inspiration and this person is supposed to be a primary teacher, but now my bishop is saying I can't have that person, then I must have done something, I must have done it wrong. Like I got my wires crossed somehow, so I'm back to the drawing board, And then there were times also where I submitted a name and they said no, and I said, listen, I know that this is a person who's supposed to be doing this. Like it has been confirmed to me, or whatever language we use, like I feel like this is their calling and this is what they need to do. And there have been times where they're like, nope. And there were other times when they're like, well, we will consider that. And although very rarely, there were times when someone was released. There was a time when, I'm trying to remember the timeline. I was the Relief Society president, and there was a counselor in the primary, and I knew that she was supposed to be my counselor, and I asked for her, and they're like, well, that's going to like throw everything into chaos, and now we're going to have to call somebody else to be her. For them, it's a lot more like office work, the bureaucracy. I didn't realize it then. I'm like, but this is the person who's supposed to be my counselor, and so I'm like, I insisted, like she is supposed to be my counselor, and they're like, okay, and so they released her from primary, and they put her in, or maybe it was the other way around, I don't remember, but they put her in my presidency, and then had to change that presidency around, but I mean, that happened very rarely. Most of the time it was like, nope, you can't have that person. And I go, okay. And I go, obedient Donna, go back to the drawing board and pray about somebody else.
But it sounds like you were happy in that.
Oh, I was. Totally. I was a fish in water. Like, this is my element. It's my life. It's all I've ever known. It's all I've ever done. It's all I want to do. Like, I don't want anything else. I don't want the priesthood. I don't want to know who John DeLynn is, or, you know what I mean? Like, I that bubble in Provo is real. I was in it and happy in my bubble. So
lots of comments. I'm going to hold off because they're going to take us away from your story. So really quickly, tell us about Provo culture. So your ward is about where geographically in Provo? Is it near the MTC, near the temple?
No, we're south.
Near the river bottoms, like where?
No, we are what's called the Timpview ghetto. So they realigned Timpview boundaries, and so it's like the strip. So it's the East Bench, but it goes all the way south too. So that's the ghetto. So I'm actually like over by Seven Peaks and the state hospital.
Okay, so more south in Provo is more considered a little bit more ghetto. I'm sure you use that term.
We use that term all the time because but we also have had many opportunities to move and have not, because we feel like within our bubble, our Provo bubble, there's this other bubble. Like, we've lived all over the country. So we've been in the mission field. We've lived where, your neighbors aren't Mormon, and you come together from 50 miles out to church on Sunday or to your activities or whatever. And so, we had heard about Utah and Utah Mormons and the culture here, and I was terrified. And the ward that we moved into, when we first moved back to Utah, we lived in West Jordan, and that was a delightful ward. We loved them, and we fit in really well. And then we moved down to Provo. There was a change of jobs, and so this was closer to my husband's job, and so we moved down here, and our house in West Jordan, I don't know if it was like we were in the bubble or like the financial, I don't know. But when we realized with this new job, it was less money, but there's that saying, some pay doesn't come in an envelope. And it was an opportunity that my husband desperately wanted. And so we realized we can't afford this house. So we're going to move down to Provo into a cheaper house. And when we realized that, we like called a realtor, and she's like, she listed it that day, and she gave us bullet points, like clean out your closet, make sure your carpets are clean, blah, 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 whatever. So she left. I immediately started taking coats out of the closet, and 20 minutes later had a phone call, and 6 hours later our house was sold. And we're like, oh, we have to find something quick, and all the things that we looked at we didn't like. But there was just one house that we liked, and we bought it, and we lucked out. Maybe it's because we like to say our ward is different because we it's more humble, if that makes sense. Like, socioeconomically, we're not up by the temple, right? But there's no competition of my clothes are better than yours, my car's better than my house is bigger, I have more stuff than you. We're all just like trying to get by, like everybody's living their lives, and we each recognize that my neighbor struggles just like I do, and there's a camaraderie in that. There's a feeling of unity and community where we're all struggling together. And when we got to a point where we weren't struggling anymore and we could have moved to the other side of Provo or whatever, we chose to stay because we love our ward. We love our neighbors. They are sincere, incredible people, And we watched their kids grow up. I've watched children be born and grow up. I've watched kids go from like saggy diaper in the backyard to serving a mission, and I watched every day as they grew. And there's such a connection there. We're part of these people's lives. We're all this tapestry that weaves together that is, my ward, and we're part of that. And we felt like we were really integrated. We were part of it. We don't want to leave that.
So you've been in this ward how long?
16 years.
That's a long time.
It is for us.
Yeah.
We've neither Steve, my husband, or I have ever lived any place this long, ever. So we've put down some deep roots. So,
yeah.
And we like our dentist. We don't want to move.
You have a good dentist?
We love our dentist. We've been going to him for 15 years. Anyway.
Okay, so that brings us to, that makes where we're about to go even more interesting, because so we know that your son comes out even more formally to you in the world at age 16, around 2015, prior to the November policy, and that even though you had a couple years notice on that, you all kind of just stuffed that back in the closet and tried to ignore it.
Yeah. Oh,
so. Tell us about, we don't need to revisit the story with Michael. Mm-hmm. We can tell the audience, check out the 2 hours where Michael talks about coming out, at Timpview High School, to his ward, to surrounding area, and what that was like. He definitely became depressed and suicidal, and Donna spent, as she told us, a couple of years trying to come to accept and embrace him, but also trying to keep him alive as he went to the hospital more than once under desires or fears around suicide and suicidality. Mm. So when do you consider your faith, the cracks in your faith starting to happen?
I don't know. Like when Michael came out, that didn't shake my faith at all, because I knew that the church was true and right and real, and somehow this had to fit. And it was just figuring out how to fit it. Like you turn that puzzle piece until it fits, and then it fits, and everything's fine. So I knew that would somehow work out. I had in my phone quotes from ward members, people in, over the pulpit in general conference, and many, many, many quotes about the atonement and loving people and how everything's going to work out and it's all going to be fine. And Neil Marriott gave a talk. I can't remember when now, but she said, she talked about their family motto, that everything will be okay. And she said, it doesn't mean that it'll be okay right now. It means that for the meek and faithful, everything will be okay. And I clung to that. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't fit into anything I know or have ever known. But it's okay, because it's all going to work out. Like, I will find the answer. And not that in the far distant future or after life, it'll all work out. Like, I felt sure that there was going to come a time where I had the answer to my prayer of why is my son gay? And then everything would be fine. We just had to find it. And so I just spent a lot of time finding, or trying, never did, but trying to find how my son fit, and what the answer was that could make everything go back to normal, I guess.
So that's kind of mind-blowing that, number one, you missed all the 10 years of the Mormon liberal progressive internet, but then also that you could have a gay, like, on the one hand, I get it. The Mormon orthodoxy hold is very strong.
Oh, yeah.
And I know plenty of gay Mormons that remain Orthodox believers. So,
and that's valid too.
Yeah, no. And that's, it's not about not being valid. It's just being like kind of really fascinating.
Yes. Yes. I think about that sometimes.
Yeah. That like,
this is interesting. Because,
I mean, it is fair to say that still in 2019, the church doesn't really embrace or accept its gay members. I mean, it says to love them and it's trying to not be mean, but it's certainly not saying we love you for who you are and be who you are and we accept you no matter what. Right. So the logic is that certainly if you're gay, but even if you're a family member of a gay or lesbian Mormon and you love that family member and you don't reject them, then you're going to be like, now, wait a minute. This church can't be true if it's not creating an open, accepting place for my gay child. And if they're thinking about killing themselves, certainly God's one true church can't make someone want to kill themselves, so the church must not be true. That's the logic, connect the dots that many of us would have, not to mention, again, trying to wonder how the thousands and tens and thousands and hundreds of thousands of actual gay and lesbian Mormons who are faithful still somehow find a way to connect those dots and remain believer.
Yeah.
But how do you explain how that isn't just immediately, your son's about to kill himself, church isn't true, let's all get out of this thing.
No, the church is totally true. The church is true. That's not even an issue. That's not even on the table.
It's not up for discussion or debate or consideration.
Is.
Yeah.
So my job then as a mom is to fit this new information into what is and what's true and what's real, And if it's not fitting, then I need to learn more, or I need to do more, or I need to, like, it's just there's a conference talk I haven't heard yet, and as soon as I hear that, it's all going to make sense. He's going to fit, He didn't feel safe at church, but I never thought that's because the church isn't true. I just thought, I know the church's stance on LGBT issues, sort of, and he doesn't feel safe here. I don't understand why he doesn't, but he doesn't, and I'm okay. That's okay with me. But that doesn't change my faith. It doesn't change the way I think and feel and what I know to be true. And so, it wasn't until the policy, the exclusionary policy in 2015, that I was thrown. I read it on Facebook in the morning while I was getting ready for work.
Okay, wait. So up until November 2015, you're like still fully Orthodox.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
So the first real crack was that November 2015.
Yeah, and even then, I'm like, this doesn't. Michael called me and said, "Mom, did you read this?" And I was like, "I did." And he said, "What do you think?" And it was almost confrontational, like he wanted me to take his side, or you know what I mean? Like, does this mean you're out of the church, or And I said, "You know what? I don't know. Because I've never doubted for one moment that a prophet or member of the quorum of the 12, past, present, future, could ever be wrong, or that they got this wrong, or this is a mistake, or everything they do and say is inspired from Heavenly Father. It's direct revelation. Christ, with his flesh and blood body, sits in the temple with the prophet. Like, I truly believed that. And that when the prophet speaks, he speaks for God. Not when he speaks for God, he's speaking for God. When the prophet speaks, he's speaking for God. This is God speaking to us. I took that very seriously. So when God says we don't want your gay kids, and if your gay kids get married, we don't want their kids either. Again, I was like, it's come from the prophet, and therefore it is true. And my job now is to make it make sense. And if it doesn't make sense to me, it's because I'm doing something wrong. I'm thinking about it in the wrong way or something. Like, it has to fit. And if it doesn't, 16 million members and a prophet of God living on the earth, breathing today. If I have an issue, it's my issue. Like, who am I to say you don't speak for God? I would never, ever even think it, let alone say it. So when the policy came out, I read it over and over and over again. I cried and cried and cried. And it came out on a Thursday, I think, or a Friday. Michael had stopped going to church by then, and every Sunday was horrible for me because my son's not in church with me. And that morning, that Sunday, I got up and I went into his room to kiss him goodbye when I would, because I was going to church. And I went to church, and I'm walking to church thinking, no wonder he doesn't want to be there. No wonder he doesn't feel safe. Like, I get it. I get it. And so I stopped fretting so much that he wasn't at church, because I'm like, I don't know that I would be at church either if I were in his place. And that was a big step for me. Obviously, I'm still going to go because church is still true and he still speaks for God, and I just need to make it fit somehow. Anyway, so, and then somebody, I think in church actually, said, I think they got this wrong. And I was like, oh, like, I was waiting for lightning to come down and strike them. Like, the prophet's never wrong. What? Like, how dare you? Honestly, how dare you? Like, that is so, it's unthinkable. It's unthinkable that they got this wrong. No. But then I started thinking about it over a long period of time, thinking, could they? Like, is it possible for them to get it wrong? And then somebody else said at some point, it's possible that they got this wrong. And I'm like, but what is the possibility that they got this wrong? And it just blew my mind that anyone could think it, let alone say it. But it didn't sit right with me. I know my son, and I know at least the God that I thought I knew. That Heavenly Father knows my child like he knows me. When I pray, because I've lost my keys, he helps me find them. I find my keys, and it's because God answered my prayer, because he knows me individually. He knows my son, and if he knows my son, there's no way he would say to Michael, we don't want you here. There's no way. And so that it opened the possibility in my mind that maybe in this one thing, they got it wrong. And I was like, oh. And just to think it, I was like, oh gosh, I don't know that I said it out loud for even a couple of years, that there's a possibility that they got this wrong. And so then I had a friend, she's articulate and smart and spiritual and incredible. And she said, what does your inner voice tell you about this? And I'm like, I don't really need to ask my inner voice, because the prophet said it. Therefore, the thinking's been done. I don't need to think about this. It's just making it fit somehow. And she goes, no, like, if you had to come up with your own, what is right for me and my family right now? What is right for me to do concerning my son, Michael? And I had never even considered that. I'd never even thought of that. And so I'm like, oh, personal revelation. But personal revelation is only used, should I buy Rice Krispies or checks? You know what I mean? Personal revelation is who should I have for this calling? Or how should I teach my lesson? Or who should I go visit today? That's what personal revelation is for. It's for my calling. And maybe for my family, what should we do for family home evening tonight? It wasn't for, is it possible that God is telling me something different than he's telling his prophet? It's unthinkable. Like, no. But I'm like, I was in so much pain, struggling with my faith and trying to hold on to my son and trying to keep him alive, but also trying to figure out how he fits into the plan. And, there was a moment where I thought, what does my inner voice say? And my inner voice is telling me they got it wrong. And that was hard. It was hard to say, hard to think, hard to acknowledge, accept. And then it was hard to think too, what next? If they got it wrong, then what? Like, now what, And so, but I also, Jacob said, he got an email from a mom who said, my kid just came out. What do I do? I'm lost. And he said, love your kid. Just love them. Love your kid. And it was so clear to me, crystal clear. I don't need to have the answer to this right now. I don't need to make any decisions right now. I just breathe and love my kid. That's all. But then if I love my kid, then I'm going against the church. And I've never gone against the church ever in anything, not even in a thought.